A presidential statement highlighting the institutional architecture for the fight against terrorism in Africa. The Arab Parliament has strongly condemned the European Parliament statement, describing it a blatant and unacceptable interference in Algeria's internal affairs. And the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Filippo Lazzarini, has once again warned against Israel's decision to ban agency's activities, saying such a measure may undermine the recently enforced ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. Good afternoon. First in our news, the UN Security Council has adopted, at the initiative of Algeria, a presidential statement highlighting the institutional architecture for the fight against terrorism in Africa. Our colleague Mariam Bershi has more details.
The statement was adopted at the end of the recent high-level debate on the fight against terrorism in Africa, held under the chairmanship of the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf. The presidential statement represents a significant development, the recognition at the highest international level of the role of the African Union's leading role for the prevention and fight against terrorism played by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, who was chosen by his African counterparts to assume this responsibility that weighs on our continent on account of its serious and complex repercussions. This came as the essential role played by the existing African mechanisms was recognized, in particular the Committee of African Intelligence and Security Services, the Counter-Terrorism Unit of the African Standby Force, and AFRIPOL, and at the insistence of the penholder Algeria, thus demonstrating the growing maturity of the continental security architecture. During the discussions, the Algerian foreign minister stressed that the current trend on terrorism in Africa is unsustainable, underlining the need for a new approach that combines security and development and strong African leadership supported by effective international partnerships. As a decisive practical measure, the statement requested the UN Secretary General to submit annual reports on the joint efforts of the African Union and the United Nations in the fight against terrorism in Africa, thus establishing an unprecedented regular follow-up mechanism. The measure constitutes an important step in institutionalizing the partnership between the African Union and the United Nations in the field of counter-terrorism and ensures continuous monitoring of progress made in this field.
And the Minister of Health and Special Envoy of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, Professor Abdelhak Saihi, has been received in Port Louis by the President of Mauritius, Navichandra Ramgoolam, to whom he handed over a message from the head of state. Masoud Sharfi has more details.
During the meeting, the two sides examined ways of strengthening bilateral cooperation in various fields, including fisheries, agriculture, industry, tourism, training, and investment in energy and renewable energy, as well as sustainable development. The promotion of these sectors aimed at enhancing the strategic partnership existing between the two countries was emphasized during the meeting, and as well as the necessity of exchanging expertise and experiences to achieve common goals. President Navin Ramgoolam, for his part, expressed his wish to visit Algeria in the near future, hoping to meet with the President of the Republic during the upcoming African Union Summit in Addis Ababa.
And more than 80 international civil servants representing 23 international and regional organizations, as well as executives representing Algerian institutions, will take part tomorrow here in Algiers in an international workshop on salaries, allowances, classification of duty stations, and staff mobility organized by the UN International Civil Service Commission in coordination with the Foreign Affairs Ministry. The workshop will also address other issues within the Commission's remit. The workshop is a platform for the ICIC to present its work and its role within the United Nations system through presentations and informal discussions on its methods and policies. The Secretary of State to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of the national community abroad, Mr. Soufiane Chaib, has held a coordination and orientation meeting in Rome, Italy, with the heads of several consular posts. Mr. Sharfi has more again.
The meeting allowed for a comprehensive assessment of the consular management and for monitoring the implementation of instructions from the country's authorities related to the improvement of services provided to the members of the Algerian community living abroad. The coordination meeting was attended by the heads of consular representations in Milan, Naples, Lyon, Marseille, Besançon, Grenoble, Nice, Montpellier, Toulouse, Saint-Étienne, Barcelona, Alicante, and Istanbul. The positive impact of the recent measures taken in favor of our diaspora was highlighted during the meeting.
And the Arab Parliament has strongly condemned the European Parliament statement regarding it or describing it as blatant and unacceptable interference in Algeria's internal affairs. The Arab Parliament called on the European Parliament to respect the decisions of the Algerian judiciary and to immediately cease such actions, which constitute a blatant violation of all international instruments affirming the respect for the sovereignty of state and non-interference in the internal affairs. It stressed its full solidarity with Algeria and urged the European Parliament not to politicize the issue of human rights or use it as a pretext for unjustified and unacceptable interference in the internal affairs of states. The Arab Parliament affirmed that the Algerian Republic is a country governed by laws and constitutional institutions that enjoy independent decision-making, as well as by judicial authorities capable of providing all the necessary guarantees to protect the freedoms, human rights, and freedom of expression of every Algerian citizen. It pointed out that the members of the European Parliament remained inactive and turned a blind eye while human rights were being violated in Palestine and the Palestinian people were being subjected to genocide before the eyes of the whole world, stressing that it was not up to the European Parliament to give lessons today to Algeria or the Arab countries in terms of applying the law and protecting freedoms. Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Ammar Benjama, has called on the international community to act urgently to help the children of Gaza heal their wounds. During a meeting devoted to the situation of the children of Gaza after more than 15 months of genocidal aggression held at the request of Algeria and Russia, Ambassador Ammar Benjama also urged the international community to unite its efforts for a better future for the children of the Palestinian enclave. To achieve this goal, Mr. Benjama stressed the need to give children in Gaza access to education and health care, noting that the challenges are immense and the scale of destruction and damage is unmeasurable.
The scale of destruction is immense. The long-term consequences on the lives of people in Gaza, particularly children, are also profound as they suffer significant losses, face severe trauma, experience injuries, and are subject to displacement. These children are now out of school. They have no access to health care. This is the dark reality children in Gaza are experiencing. The perpetrators of this heinous killing, heinous crime against children must be held accountable. There should be no room for impunity, no room for immunity.
Mr. Benjama underlined that all children are born equal and free and all should enjoy a decent and dignified life.
All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Children, regardless of where they are born, have the inalienable right to a dignified life, to education, and to a joyful, safe, and secure childhood. Children in Gaza should not be an exception.
Finally, expressing his wish to see the ceasefire agreement, which came into force on January 19, become permanent, Mr. Benjama affirmed that the perpetrators of crimes against humanity committed in Gaza must be held accountable. Impunity has no place, he added. The Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, has once again warned against Israel's decision to ban the agency's activities, saying such a measure may undermine the recently enforced ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. In a message posted on social media, he stressed that preventing UNRWA from operating in Gaza would deal a blow to the hopes of the peoples who went through indescribable sufferings. The head of UNRWA argued that during the early days of the enforcement of the ceasefire, the agency managed to provide food to 1 million people and distributed meals to about 300,000 others, notably in Gaza's northern part. He stressed that the agency must pursue its activities while recalling that more than 500,000 of boys and girls were helped by UNRWA's mental health specialists on account of the tremendous trauma caused by 15 months of war. Meanwhile, the Israeli occupying authorities today released the second batch of Palestinian prisoners as provided for by the ceasefire agreement recently enforced in Gaza. According to the Palestinian Commission for Prisoners and Ex-Prisoners Affairs and the Palestinian Prisoners Society, the second batch includes 200 prisoners comprising individuals with life sentences and high prison terms. Among them, 121 prisoners were serving life sentences and 79 others were serving long-term sentences. The release saw for 114 prisoners from Offer prison transferred to Ramallah, 16 prisoners returned to Gaza, and 70 exiled outside Palestine. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has appointed Ghanian Hana Sirwan as his new special representative and head of the UN support mission in Libya. She succeeds Senegalese Abdoulaye Bathily, whose mandate expired last May. The new UN chief special representative was his special envoy to the Horn of Africa from 2022 to 2024 and head of the UN office from 2018 to 2020. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, clashes have continued in the east part of the country between the M23 armed group and the Congolese army supported by elite UN peacekeepers. After the failure of mediation under the aegis of Angola, the M23 has regained ground in the recent weeks and fighting has intensified around the eastern provincial capital of North Kivu, Goma, which has a population of 1 million and at least as many displaced persons. The United Nations mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, MONUSCO, announced that the Rapid Reaction Forces, MONUSCO's elite unit, have been actively engaged in intense fighting. The organization added that over the last 48 hours, MONUSCO's heavy artillery has carried out missions against M23 positions. It added that there are up to 15,000 peacekeepers in the DRC. Meanwhile, in Kinshasa, after a defense council chaired by the Congolese head of state, Felix Tshisekedi, the army confirmed the death of the military governor of North Kivu, General Peter Krimiwami, who was shot near a front line. UN agencies have warned that an attack on Goma, which is surrounded by M23 rebels, would be catastrophic as more than 400,000 people have been displaced by the violence in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees said that the number of displaced people had almost doubled in a week. And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for a weekly program, starting with my colleague Marim Bershi, a program devoted to the kingdom of Aksum. It will be followed by another program on the province of Biskra here in Algeria by our colleague Aziza Gassias. For me, I'll meet you again tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye. To travel back in time and learn about the most prominent events that marked human history, no need